You ever catch yourself thinking about, like, how much what's going on in your head actually shapes what happens to you outside? I mean, we're always chasing those aha moments, right? And I think today's topic is really going to think about things in a whole new way.
I think so too.
Yeah.
It's this idea that imagining something isn't just about like picturing it, you know? It actually creates reality.
Oh, yeah.
It's wild.
I mean, that's more than just positive thinking, right?
It's totally.
That's like your mind can actually change your experience.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we've got a lecture from Neville Goddard.
Okay.
And it's called Down to the Sea in Ships.
Hey, I love the title.
I know, right?
So evocative.
But, you know, a lot of people are already familiar with Neville's work, but in this one, he says something really, really interesting.
Okay.
He says it's not just about imagining a better future.
Okay.
Our imagination can even, like, reshape how we understand the past.
Okay, so hold on. I got to wrap my head around that one.
Right.
So not just what's coming up,
Yes.
but what's already happened. You're saying we can change that too?
That's what he's suggesting,
Yeah.
and he tells this truly remarkable story to illustrate the point. So that's where we're going to start.
Okay, so take us there.
Okay, so Neville talks about this woman who starts listening to his teachings in September.
Okay.
Not long after that, she gets some pretty bad news.
Oh, no.
Yeah, she's diagnosed with cataracts in both eyes, and not just by one doctor,
Oh, wow.
but by two.
Okay, so that's a pretty serious diagnosis.
You would think, right? I mean, that can really shake someone up, but instead of just accepting this, you know, as her fate, she decides to put this principle into practice.
The imagining creates reality.
Exactly.
Okay.
So she starts to really vividly imagine herself at the eye doctor, and she's reading the chart perfectly.
Okay.
Like she sees every letter with crystal clarity.
She's got 20/20 vision in her mind.
Perfect vision.
Right.
Now, what's really interesting is she takes this even further.
Okay.
So at first, it's just the visual, you know, seeing that perfect vision. But then she adds in another component. She starts to imagine hearing someone say, "Your eyes are fine. They're perfect."
Wow. So she's not just seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
Now she's hearing it.
Exactly. She's like bringing in multiple senses to reinforce this reality.
I like that, adding layers.
Yeah.
It's multisensory.
Right.
Okay.
And this wasn't just like a one-time thing.
Yeah.
She made this a regular practice
Consistent.
every day.
Okay.
So about a month into doing this consistently,
Okay.
she has to go renew her driver's license.
The dreaded DMV. Oh, I hate the DMV.
Of course. Who doesn't?
Okay.
But anyway, she goes in, and it's time for the eye test.
Okay.
Takes off her glasses like they tell you to,
Uh-huh.
and she starts reading the chart.
Okay.
And get this, she reads the first 3 lines perfectly.
No way.
Yeah. And the inspector, you know, echoing the words she's been imagining, says, "Your eyes are fine, they're perfect."
Wow.
And she passes.
Okay, but she had cataracts in both eyes a month ago.
Yeah.
This is wild.
But here's the really interesting part. It's her internal reaction,
Okay.
even with the external confirmation, right? She passed the test, the inspector saying exactly what she'd been visualizing, but she still feels this disconnect.
What do you mean?
Like she knew that 3rd line was kind of fuzzy, and the 4th line she couldn't see at all.
Right.
So her initial imagining it had manifested partly, right?
Yeah.
But it hadn't completely aligned with what she truly desired.
That perfect vision.
That crystal clear, perfect vision.
Okay.
So what does she do? She doesn't just settle.
Right.
She keeps refining that mental picture in her mind, and she's really persistent about seeing everything clearly.
Okay.
So about 2 months later, she starts to notice something weird.
Okay.
Her glasses, they feel off.
What, like they don't fit right?
Yeah, like her vision's changing.
Wow.
She even tells a friend that she thinks she needs a stronger prescription.
Okay.
So her friend's like, "Well, why don't you go see your eye doctor?" So she goes to a 3rd eye doctor.
Okay.
Same kind of tests as before, very thorough. And the diagnosis this time is completely different.
Wow.
The doctor says, "You don't have cataracts." And then get this, he says, "You have no astigmatism."
Oh, wait a minute.
I know.
This is crazy.
It is crazy, right?
And she was wearing glasses to correct astigmatism.
That's what's so wild about this.
This is wild.
And the doctor even predicts that her vision is going to stay this good for the next 10 years.
Okay, so her mental picture became her physical reality.
That's the takeaway here, you
Yeah.
know? Our inner world is shaping the outer world.
It's a powerful story, and it really makes you think, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got this amazing story of healing,
Yeah,
but there's more to the story of this lady.
there is.
To really emphasize how much she had started to believe in this power, She had this really vivid dream.
She did. Tell us about that. So in this dream, she's like an invisible observer on the freeway.
Okay.
And there are these 3 cars stopped across all the lanes.
Uh-huh.
Looks like there was an accident, but the cars themselves aren't like visibly damaged. And then this other car comes speeding down the freeway towards them.
Oh, no.
Right. So this is where her belief in imagination being able to shape reality really kicks in, even in a dream state, where we usually feel like we don't have control.
Yeah. Okay.
So how did this play out?
Right. How does she intervene?
So as this invisible observer in her mind, she sends the speeding car back to where it came from.
Okay.
Then she mentally rearranges those 3 stopped cars exactly as they were before.
Okay.
And finally, she replays the whole scene in her mind. But this time, she imagines the speeding car hitting its brakes and safely swerving around the other cars and just continuing on without an accident.
So she's essentially directing the dream.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's the really remarkable part.
What happened?
She says that this exact sequence of events, she saw it happen in real life afterwards.
Wait, so the car speeding them, braking them, maneuvering around the stopped cars?
The whole thing.
She saw it play out in real life exactly as she had imagined it in her dream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this dream, and then it actually happening in reality, I think it really shows how deep her conviction had become.
Yeah.
Like even in this seemingly uncontrolled environment of a dream, her understanding of imagining creates reality. It was so strong, it manifested as this intervention.
Just like her subconscious was already on board.
Exactly. And then it played out in her waking life, too.
So that's incredible.
Yeah.
We've got the physical healing and now this dream that seems to influence what happens in the real world.
Yeah.
Now, Neville takes us from these, what he calls earthly things, to interpreting scripture.
He does.
How does he connect those two?
It all comes down to belief.
Okay.
He quotes John 3:12. It says, "If I tell you earthly things and you do not believe me, how could you believe if I tell you heavenly things?"
Okay, so what's he getting at with that?
His point is, if we can see and experience how our imagination can shape everyday reality, like the lady's story,
Yeah.
then we might be more open to grasping deeper truths
About ourselves.
about ourselves.
About our connection to something bigger.
And-
Okay, so in this lecture, who does Neville say is the one who fulfills scripture?
He says it's Jesus Christ.
Okay.
He's very clear about this.
Yeah.
He says that Jesus came specifically to fulfill scripture, and he uses passages from the book of Luke to back this up.
Okay, so does he offer like a physical description of Jesus Christ in this context?
Interestingly enough, he doesn't.
What?
In fact, he points out that there is no detailed physical description of Jesus Christ in scripture.
Huh. I never really thought about that.
Yeah, and his reasoning is that this fulfillment, it's not about one specific person in history.
Right.
It's meant to happen within each of us.
Okay. I think I'm starting to see where he's going with this.
Right. And he even connects this to the second commandment, the one about not making graven images.
Okay.
He says that focusing on a specific external image, it misses the deeper internal reality.
Okay. So it's not about worshiping a person.
No.
It's about recognizing something within ourselves. Okay, now this idea of God becoming man. So man can become God, and scripture being fulfilled inside each of us.
Yeah.
Where does that lead us? What's the big takeaway?
Well, the profound implication is that the divine isn't separate from us.
Okay.
God becomes human so that humanity can realize its own divine nature.
Okay, so it's not about worshiping an external God.
Right.
It's about recognizing the divine potential that's already within each of us.
Exactly. And awakening that potential.
And scripture is like a guidebook for doing that.
Exactly.
Okay, so the title of this lecture is Down to the Sea in Ships.
Right.
Let's steer our deep dive toward that central image.
Let's do it.
Now, Neville brings in the 107th Psalm.
He does.
Why that particular verse?
He focuses on verse 23.
Okay.
And it says, "Some went down to the sea in ships doing business on the great waters."
Okay.
But what's really important for Neville is that in the original Hebrew manuscripts, this verse, it's marked with the letter none at the beginning and the end.
Okay. No, like the letter.
Yeah, Hebrew letter.
Okay. And what's the significance of that?
So none, which kind of looks like a fish when it's used like this to bracket a verse.
Yeah.
It means that the words should be rearranged to find a deeper meaning.
Oh, so it's like a hidden code.
Yeah, kinda.
Okay. So how does Neville rearrange this verse?
Yeah.
And what does it tell us?
Okay, so he transposes it to this, "On the great waters doing business, some went down into the sea."
Okay.
So it's a subtle change in the word order,
Yeah.
but it shifts the focus.
From just sailing and doing business to something more.
to the act of descent, going deeper within yourself while still being engaged with the everyday world.
Okay, so it's about going deeper internally while still living your life externally.
Exactly.
Now, Neville shares a personal experience from when he was younger living in New York City.
He does.
How does this connect to that idea of going down to the sea?
So he talks about this challenging period in his life where he was determined not to go back to the comfort of his family's home in Barbados. And even when he was facing real hardship, he was basically broke even, facing potential starvation.
Wow.
He refused to take the easy way out.
Huh.
So he sees this difficult time as his own, going down to the sea, while still dealing with the business of life.
Trying to figure things out.
Trying to find his way and understand reality.
Okay, and during this time, he has a really vivid dream about a ship.
He does.
Tell us about that dream.
So in the dream, he's the young captain of this large cargo ship.
Okay.
And they get caught in this violent storm.
Oh?
Yeah, the waves are huge, like reaching the sky, and the ship's being tossed around.
Sounds terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And he knows the ship is going to sink.
Oh, wow.
So he makes a conscious decision to strap himself to the wheel.
He's going down with the ship.
He is.
Wow.
And he remembers this experience so clearly.
And then he wakes up.
Wakes up in his own bed.
Okay, so how does he connect this powerful dream to the fulfillment of Scripture within a person?
He sees this dream as like a symbolic enactment of that transposed verse.
The one from Psalms.
Yes. So while doing the business of life, represented by the cargo ship,
Yeah.
he experienced a descent into the depths within himself.
So the storm and the sinking ship, that's the descent.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this act of facing potential destruction, even in a dream, it becomes like a personal manifestation of the Scripture.
I'm starting to get a sense of this going down into the sea.
Yeah.
It's not literal.
Right.
It's about going deeper within yourself.
Voicing your fears, your
Yeah.
limitations.
Okay, so he also brings in the 27th chapter of Acts,
He does.
the story of Paul's shipwreck.
Yeah.
What's he drawing from that story?
Well, he highlights this important detail that in Paul's shipwreck, no lives were lost.
Oh,
Really the ship.
Okay.
So then he digs into the symbolic meaning of the word ship in Hebrew and Greek.
Okay.
And it turns out it's connected to these ideas of groaning, mourning, lamenting, like this feeling of being constricted by our limitations.
Experiencing anguish?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the ship represents that feeling of being limited.
Yes.
Okay, so if the ship symbolizes that state, what does Neville say is the true nature of man in this whole metaphor?
He introduces this concept of man as the ark of God.
Okay, the ark like Noah's Ark.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But here's the key. The Hebrew word for ark also means coffin.
Whoa. Okay, that takes a dark turn.
It does, doesn't it?
A little bit.
But it gets really interesting. He quotes William Blake.
Okay.
Blake says, "All that I behold, though it appears without it, is within in my imagination, of which this world of mortality is but a shadow."
Okay, so he's saying the physical world is like a shadow of what's going on inside us.
Exactly. And Neville uses this to say that we are the container, the coffin,
Right.
in which God enters and will eventually awaken.
So God is within us, waiting to be awakened. And this awakening happens when we fulfill Scripture.
Yes.
Okay, man is the coffin containing God. That's a pretty intense image.
It is, isn't it?
What are we supposed to do with that understanding?
It's a call for courage.
Courage to do what?
To die to our old, limited ways of thinking.
Okay.
To face that metaphorical storm and the potential sinking of our current self-image.
So it's not about literal death.
No.
It's about letting go of our old limited beliefs.
Yes.
And embracing something greater.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's come back to the idea of Christ and the fulfillment of Scripture.
Okay.
Neville says that all the stories in Scripture are true,
Yes.
and they're ultimately fulfilled within each person.
Right.
So can you explain what he means when he says that Christ is the man in whom Scripture is fulfilled?
So he's saying that Christ isn't just a historical figure.
Right.
It's more like a state of being where that divine plan, the one laid out in Scripture, comes to life.
Okay.
And since this plan unfolds within each of us, Christ is basically the fully realized divine potential within every person.
Okay, so Christ isn't someone outside of us.
No.
It's a potential for divinity that's within each of us.
Exactly. And he says that Scripture is essentially the instruction manual for unlocking this potential through our imagination.
Interesting.
And he also emphasizes that everything in the world around us has a symbolic meaning.
Okay, so everything's a symbol.
It is, in a way. It reflects our place in this unfolding story of God within.
Okay, I like
Yeah,
that.
it makes you look at the world differently, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Okay.
So he also says that the only Christ is buried within man, who is both the ark and the coffin.
Right.
How does he tie this back to our physical body?
He makes this really interesting connection between our skull and Golgotha, the place of the skull.
Okay.
You know, the place where Jesus was crucified?
Yeah.
He's saying that our skull is like the tomb where this Christ consciousness is buried.
Okay.
And it's also where Scripture is ultimately fulfilled.
Okay, so it's all happening within us.
Yes.
And he brings back the story of the lady as an example of this.
Yes, he does.
To show how belief and imagination can really change things in the physical world.
Yeah.
It's demonstrating that divine power at work.
Exactly.
Okay, he also mentions John 3.14, linking the lifting of the serpent by Moses in the wilderness to the lifting up of the Son of Man.
Yeah.
What's the meaning behind that connection?
He interprets this as another symbol of our creative power.
Right.
Just as that serpent was lifted up for healing, so too must the Son of Man be lifted up. Which represents our own creative faculty, recognized and used actively.
Okay.
And then he defines Christ from 1 Corinthians 1.24 as the power of God and the wisdom of God.
Okay.
And he concludes by saying that ultimately there's only God and this power is within us.
Powerful stuff. Now, Neville shares this very personal and profound vision that his wife experienced.
He does.
Tell us about that vision and how it relates to our understanding of this divine nature within us.
Okay, so on March 24th, Neville's wife has this experience where a voice speaks to her.
Okay.
And the voice says, "You are David, my dear, and I want to love you with all my heart. I am God. I am, and I am you."
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an incredible experience.
Right.
And it's central to Neville's teachings about this essential unity between the soul and the divine.
Absolutely.
Now, he goes on to reference the 89th Psalm and how David is described there.
He does.
What parallels does he draw between David and Jesus Christ?
So he points out that in the 89th Psalm, David is called his chosen one, the servant of the Lord, the anointed of the Lord, and the firstborn.
Those are all titles given to Jesus.
Exactly. So he's highlighting that the individual soul, represented by David, is
Right.
one with God the Father.
That's a big concept.
It is. And he talks about the mystery of this oneness.
The idea that we are all connected to the divine.
Yes,
Okay. And he also touches on how David is described in 1 Samuel 16.
he does.
Why are those qualities important?
So in 1 Samuel 16, David is described as a man of valor, courage, a warrior.
Okay.
He's got great presence. He speaks prudently.
Okay.
And Neville suggests that these are the qualities that naturally come out in a person as they wake up to their true divine nature.
So that inner strength, the courage to go down into the depths like we talked about before,
Right.
they're all part of this awakening.
Exactly.
Okay, so we see that everything said about Christ is also said about David, who is also called God's only begotten son.
Right.
What's Neville's final conclusion from this connection?
He concludes that Jesus Christ is the power and wisdom of God, which is inseparable from God, and ultimately there is only God, Jehovah.
Okay.
And he describes this process where God sends his power into the depths, into the individual, right, allowing it to die to its limitations, and then raising it up again, returning to the Father.
Okay, and it connects that to John 16.28.
Exactly.
That's a whole new way of looking at Scripture.
It is, isn't it?
Okay, so let's bring it back down to earth for a minute.
Sure.
Back to practical everyday life.
Let's do it.
What does Neville say about assumption and faith?
So he returns to that core principle. Whatever you desire, believe that you received it and you will. And he emphasizes that an assumption, even if it seems false right now, if you believe it with unwavering faith, it will harden into fact.
Okay, so our assumptions can literally shape our reality.
Yes. He says that assumption itself is an act of faith.
Okay.
And without faith, it's impossible to access this creative power.
So we have to believe it before we see it.
Exactly.
Even if what we believe seems impossible right now.
Right. And he encourages us to dare to assume that things are already as we want them to be.
To live as if our desires are already fulfilled.
Yes.
Okay, I like that. It's bold.
It is.
He even shares this recurring experience he had as a child involving the ocean.
He does.
How does that fit in with everything?
So he talks about this thing that would happen to him every month.
Okay.
Where he would vividly feel himself becoming both a vast ocean and a single wave.
Wow.
Yeah. And he'd experience the immense power of the ocean, but also the vulnerability of that wave being tossed around.
Yeah.
And then he'd feel himself merging back into the ocean. He says this went on for years before he understood it as a manifestation of God within him.
So he was experiencing the oneness of everything.
Yes.
The power and the vulnerability.
All part of the same divine reality.
Wow. Okay, as we start to wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's Neville's final message?
He really urges us to believe in the power of our own imagination in our everyday lives,
Okay.
even to the point of using it to revise our understanding of past events.
Okay, so we can change the past
That's what he suggests.
in our minds.
Yes. And by doing that, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves.
Okay, and he reminds us that everything said in Scripture about Jesus Christ will ultimately happen in us.
Because Jesus Christ represents that fulfillment of Scripture within each person.
Right, okay, and he specifically says to avoid creating a fixed image of Jesus in our minds.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because, as we've talked about, Scripture doesn't give us a specific description of what Jesus looked like.
Right.
And for Neville, Jesus Christ is that universal symbol of fulfilling Scripture. And that symbol is within each of us.
The ark in the coffin.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if we create a fixed image in our minds, it limits this potential.
Yeah.
We miss the point that it's about an inner realization.
Okay, so his final advice is to actually apply this principle in our own lives.
Yes.
Whether it's with our finances, our health, our relationships, anything where we want change.
Mm-hmm.
And to be willing to commit to this imaginative act, even if it feels scary.
Even if it feels like a kind of death.
A death of our old perceptions.
Exactly. He assures us that this isn't about actual physical death.
Yeah.
It's about proving to ourselves how powerful our creative faculty truly is.
Wow.
And he even mentions that he doesn't consciously remember physically going down with the ship in his dream,
Right.
emphasizing that these profound experiences, they ultimately unfold within us.
That's powerful. I mean, this idea that our imagination isn't just something passive,
Yeah.
but that it's the very force that shapes our reality, even our understanding of the divine.
It's a lot to think about.
It really is. It changes everything.
It does. And it raises a big question for you listening.
Oh, yeah. Super.
Given this idea that there's this inherent divinity within you and that your imagination is this powerful force, what scripture, what unfolding story might be happening in your life right now that you haven't even noticed?
Wow.
And how is your imagination shaping that story, whether you're aware of it or not?
That's an amazing question to ponder.
Mm.
You know, maybe we really are each an arc containing the whole of life.
Maybe we are.
Until next time, everyone think about the power in that realization.
Take care.
Bye.